Okay, this is 8th grade activity 2.5. Students will explore a real-life scenario solving a system of linear equations. We'll be using graphs and tables in this one. Our standards are 8EE, 8A, B, and C. You'll be using your practice journal on this one. It's page 41 through 44. If you don't have your practice journal, you can find this on in your hardcover book starting on page 74. Okay, so today we're actually going to be introduced to systems of equations. This is in your practice journal on page 41. You'll have the same thing that I do, only mine's a colored version. We're going to work together on this one. It says work with a partner. Your family starts a bed and breakfast in your home. You spend $500 fixing up a bedroom to rent out. Your cost for food and utilities is $10 per night. That would be when somebody stays. Your family charges $60 per night to rent out that bedroom. We're going to write a system of equations to represent our cost. So first of all, what is a cost? Well, that's what it's costing us as a family to be able to open up that room for somebody to stay. So our cost that we have is we have to renovate the room, which was $500. And then every time somebody stays, we have to go ahead and spend money on their breakfast food, as well as the utilities like the heat, the electricity, and so forth for them to stay in that room, which we went ahead and said was going to be approximately $10 per night. So this is working with a model. So we went ahead and started out with a model, and we're going to practice once again working through when they give us a model. So here we have our cost in dollars, which we're going to use the letter C, equals $10 per night, so $10 per night. And then the number of nights, which we don't know, so we're going to put in X, so times X. Instead of putting the times sign, I'm just going to write X right next to the $10 plus 500. Okay, so there's our equation for our cost, what it's going to cost our family. We also are going to write an equation that represents our revenue. That would be our income. So our income in this scenario is every time somebody stays, we get $60 per night every time they stay. So our revenue equation is we're going to use an R to represent revenue equals $60 per night and times the number of nights. So once again, we'll use X. So take note that we used X in both equations was representing the number of nights. Okay, so they were representing the same thing. Now we're going to go ahead and actually work with these systems of linear equations. These two, when we work with them together, these two equations are called a system of linear equations. It's when we have two or more sets of linear equations and we find the solution to them. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and you guys can flip to your next page of your book, and you have a table that looks similar to this. So off to the side, I'm going to go ahead and write the equations that we had, and we're going to go through and actually, we're going to go ahead and actually solve and fill in this table. So my equation for our cost for our family was, well, the cost was $10 per night plus the $500 to renovate the house. And then our revenue was our income, and that was $60 per night. So there's our two equations. So now we're going to go ahead and plug in into our setup here, our X's. So if we plug in X where our 0 where X is, 10 times 0 would be $0. So if we didn't have somebody stay, we would get 0, or we would have to pay $0 for that night stay. And then it still cost us $500 to renovate, so it's still costing us $500. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and plug in 1. And you're going to see a pattern here really quickly. So if we plug in a 1 there, 10 times 1 is 10 plus 500 would be $510. So now we'll go ahead and plug in our 2 to there. So 10 times 2 is 20 plus 500 is 520. And we'll do it one more time. And then we're going to go ahead and work with our sequence that's going on. So 3 nights. So 10 times 3 would be 30 plus 500 would be 530. Now, systems of linear equation have a consistent pattern. So from here on out, just because I'm doing so many, we're going to go ahead and find what the pattern is. So if we look between our numbers, it goes up by 10 every time. So let's just finish out the cost equation with using our pattern. So 530 add 10 would be 540, 10 more, 550, 560, 570, 580, 590, 600, 610. And we could continue that forever. Okay, but we're gonna go ahead and stop there. Okay, so now our revenue equation, I'm gonna erase this off just so that I can do the same concept that I did with the first one. In our revenue equation, we're gonna go ahead and substitute in, once again, our X for where X is there. So if we had somebody stay 0 nights, obviously we're not getting any income. So 60 times 0 is going to give us 0. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and plug in our 1. So 160 times 1 is 60. So now we'll go ahead and plug in the 2 for the X. So 60 times 2 is 120. We'll do one more, and then we'll discuss out our sequence. So 60 times 3 is going to give us 180. Okay, so now if we continue that sequence, we notice that it's going up by 60 from one day to the next. So on day 4, if we had somebody stay a 4th time, or we had rented it out a 4th night, we would do 60 times 4, which is 240. And we're just going to increase by 60 every time. So 300, 360, 420, increase by 60 is going to give us 480. And then increase by 60 would give us 540, 600, and 660. Okay, so we could continue, but once again, we're going to go ahead and stop there. So letter B says, how many nights do you need to rent the bedroom before you break even? So what they're meaning there is, where do we find that we've spent $600, which was our cost, and we've also gotten a revenue or an income of $600? Well, I kind of gave the answer away. That was right here. We had the same cost and the same revenue on day 10. So how many nights? Well, we would have to rent out our room for 10 nights to break even, to make sure that we've put in as much money as we're now, getting in income. So the other thing that you need to understand is any day beyond day 10 is now going to be profit. Now we won't get $60 profit, because we have to remember that every time somebody stays, there's those costs of electricity or utilities, as well as the food that you buy for breakfast, and that's $10 a night. So really every time after day 10 that somebody stays, we're going to be making $50 a night. That's pure profit that we don't have to pay out. Now, obviously, as time goes on, maybe there's going to be other things that you're going to have to fix in the house, or maybe cost of food goes up. But with that, you also learn that, cost of somebody staying the night, instead of $60, you might start charging more. That's pretty much working with a system of equations. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and shift. And we'll go ahead and shift to our little graph. I got to grab my book quick. So when we look at our graph, basically what this is doing is giving us a visual of what that table that we just got done doing would look like. So when we look at our table, and you guys have the table right at the top, and I don't have that, so I have to look actually in my book where I have mine filled out. We're going to go ahead and graph out this information. Now realize that the graph is not going to be perfect, but we'll start out with some of them, and then I'm going to show you another method. So it says graph the cost equation from activity 1. So our cost equation was C equals 10x plus 500. Now you guys are used to working with a graph that's X and Y's. So our C is really our Y. So I could change that to a Y if I wanted to, or I could to a C, or I could just change this to a Y. We were just putting a C in there so that we remembered that meant our cost. Okay, so now when I go through and I plot this out, graphing it out, remember we always start with this. You guys aren't used to numbers that large, but on this graph, it goes up to 500. So I'm gonna put a dot at 500. And then I'm gonna follow the slope of 10 over 1. So I would go up 10 and over 1. Well, it's kind of hard because if I go over 1, yes, one box works. But each of these boxes here between the 500 and the 600 is worth 50. So it's really hard to go up 10 and over 1. I can kind of guesstimate it would be somewhere in there. And then if I continued that out, I would eventually get up to that 50. So what I'm going to do is, if I want to make this a 50, since every box goes up by 50, I would have to go times 5, which means 1 times 5 is going to give me 5 boxes over. So I'm going to do my slope of 50 over 5, just so that I can mark right on a dot. So if I go up 50, which is 1 box, and over 5 boxes, my dot would be right there. So if I go ahead and draw my line through those 2 points, it would look something like that. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and do the same concept, only I'm going to do the revenue. So my revenue equation was R, which was now going to be a Y, equals 60X. Okay, since there's nothing back here, that's like a plus 0. So we're going to start at 0 on our Y line. And then we would go up 60 and over 1. But once again, if I go up 60, that's a little above the first box. So it would be kind of somewhere in there. It's not exactly perfect. So I want to go through and find a multiple of that 60 that would either be one of these hundreds or one of the 50s. Well, 60 won't go into 100 evenly or 200, but it will 300. So if I were to take this times 5, that would give me the 300. So my 1 on the bottom times 5. So my graph or my slope for that part, I want to do as 300 over 1 times 5 is 5. So from this point right here of 0, I'm going to go up to 300 and over to 5, which is right there. And now I'm going to draw my line through that. Okay, so when I'm looking at this, I'm seeing kind of where it's not landing exactly on a point. So I'm going to erase these and see that I'm exactly on a corner, and I am on that one for the most part. This one, I'm slightly off on my little line here, so I'm going to adjust. And this is where having a straight edge is a lot nicer. It was 5, so I need to cut through that corner right there. Right there is where I was off. So now when I look at this, I'm seeing they're intersecting right here. And when I go through to write or figure out where they're common, well, once again, that was day 10, and it was at $600. So as we're working through these, you guys are going to start working with coordinates. So the way that I would write out my answer to a system of equations is, remember back here, we could see it visually on the table right here. And we said that it was 10 nights, and really that was $600 was our break even point. So the way that I would show that when I'm doing a graph is I would write it out as my X line, because remember coordinates are as XY, was a 10, and my Y line was 600. Now you guys aren't going to work necessarily with numbers that big, but you're still going to do the same concept. So that's pretty much it for the activity. No, you don't have to finish out the rest of it, just because we're going to kind of be working, first of all, with tables, and then we'll move into graphing. And so I don't really want you to have to do activity 4 for this part of the lesson. So that's pretty much it. Just make sure that you've got that filled out in your book and share that with me. So good luck with that.